Hey, sophomores! Happy Good Friday to you. If you're watching this on the day the video comes out, anyway. But we're about to start, the Easter weekend, and I wanted to get this last video out to you guys early on Friday, so those of you who wanted to work on it could and look at it. I do have to report that my estimates yesterday were pretty much dead on. That I had like about two or three people actually watch yesterday's video. So maybe some of you are putting it off till the weekend and going to watch it then. I hope so. But if not, those of you who did watch it, thank you. And thank you for I had one of you even reach out and tell me that you really appreciated this. So thank you for that. So we got three chapters we're looking at today. We've got two more of the Tuesdays. We've got the fourth and fifth Tuesdays. The fourth one is going to talk about death, which that's really their first major topic that they planned to cover. And then we're going to talk about his idea about family. The one on family is really kind of not super powerful. It does have some emotional moments. But this first chapter we're going to read before those is called The Professor, and this gives us some background on Morrie. And this is really key to understand, or to really being impressed by this man even more for what he's gone through. So let's look at some of this. He starts out talking about, right away, one of the most tragic moments in his life when he was 8 years old and his mother dies. His father is a Russian immigrant. His father doesn't read or speak English, so the letter that comes to them, because apparently she died in a hospital, they weren't there, the letter announcing her death, he has to read this to his father at 8 years old. That's how he finds out his mother died. And he has to see his dad go through that initial shock. So really a traumatic beginning to life for this guy. The funeral, they talk about that. That's depressing. He has family members that say, what will you do now? I mean, you don't want to be that voice when kids are that vulnerable and basically tell them that nothing's going to be okay. So we get that. He starts crying. We see from an early age that his classmates just don't connect with him because he is so emotional. And, that's just not, definitely in that time period, it's just not what men were supposed, or boys were supposed to do. Afterwards, they give a little more information about his dad. His dad was trying to escape being drafted into the Russian army, so he came to America. He worked in the fur trade, but because he was had limited education and didn't speak English, there weren't a lot of jobs for him. So his family was dirt poor. The mom operated a candy store, and while she was there, they had a little more income. But once she dies, the poverty is just intense. The boys actually go to stay. The boys, Morrie and his brother David, Charlie. His brother's Charlie. I think it's Charlie. His brother and him go out to stay in this cabin in the woods, which they love because they get to go outside and play. But sadly enough, tragedy's not done with Morrie. His brother's stricken with polio. Now, Morrie's 9 years old and thinks that his brother got polio because they were playing outside in the rain the night before, something he suggested. So at 9 years old, he feels like, he's lost his mom. He's caused his brother to have this debilitating illness. And he just, the poor kid has every reason to grow up to be a bitter, hateful human being, to be honest with you. But instead, he goes to church or synagogue. Sorry, Morrie's family's Jewish. Has the ability, or he chooses to go to synagogue every morning and pray for his mother and his brother. But a lot of pressure on it. Now, he does have something that helps. And if things continue to go this way, perhaps he does end up being a lot more bitter. But his father remarries, and his stepmother is a very kind, loving person who shows him a lot of affection when his father shows him none. His father is just the stereotypical figure from this time period who, might as well just ignore that his kids even exist. The new stepmother, Ava, comes in, though, and she really dotes on these kids. She loves them. She stresses the importance of education with them. See, now this is where we look at the concept of nature versus nurture. Are you a product of the events that happen in your life, or are you a product of your surroundings and how they impact you? And obviously, there's a lot of emphasis on the surroundings, okay? There's a lot of people that lose family members at an early age. Some turn out to be these bitter, angry people. Some of them turn out to be some of the best people you'll ever meet. The situations are the same, but the surroundings are often different. And this lady Eva basically saves Morrie and his brother. But they're still poor. They're still poverty. They still can't afford anything. They say some nights all they have to eat is bread, which at least they had something, I guess. But Morrie is education is stressed, and that is where I think he initially finds a lot of his love for education. Now, one of the cool, and I want to say cool here, I don't mean like it's that's such a neat part. It's just that it's so powerful. One of the things the album does really well is this last little part of this second section in this where we're talking about Ava. Um, it says he studied at night by the lamp at the kitchen table, and in the mornings he would go to the synagogue to say the Kaddish, the memorial prayer for the dead, for his mother. He did this to keep her memory alive. Incredibly, Morrie had been told by his father never to talk about her. Charlie wanted young David to think Ava was his natural mother. It was a terrible burden to Morrie. For years, the only evidence Morrie had of his mother was a telegram announcing her death. He had hidden it the day it arrived, and he would keep it the rest of his life. So at a young age, this child, the only thing he has to remind him of his mother is a telegram indicating she died. Again, tragedy heaped up on tragedy for this poor boy. All right. The last section of this, they talk about, it's very brief. When he becomes a teenager, Morrie's dad takes him to the fur factory and tries to get him a job. And Morrie is, I think I may have called him Murray a minute ago, I apologize. Morrie is mortified by this. The fur business is not, the actual making the coats and stuff, especially this time period, was not a pretty thing. So he was terrified. There is no work for him. He gets told basically, we have nothing for you, and Morrie considers that a blessing. And it even says that he decides from that point on he will never do any work that exploited someone else, and he would now never allow himself to make money off the sweat of others. Now, sadly enough, this is one of those little statements that a lot of people make when they realize they're suffering out in the world. You hear a lot of people say this in college, and then they turn out to be lawyers for, criminal defense lawyers or whatever, or they go and become big bankers and things like that, where, no offense to people who do those jobs, but in a lot of ways, they are in fact profiting off of others. They are in fact building a career off of other people's backs. So it's really easy to change that when you see that paycheck. It's really hard to stick to that, but Morrie's going to. Now, he realizes he has no clue what he wants to do. He says, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor. I can't handle blood, so I don't know what to do. And the last line of this chapter is, it was only through default that the best professor I ever had became a teacher. So basically, he kind of lucks into it, but it's where he's supposed to be, okay? If I had more time, I'd tell you the story of how I became a teacher, which was very similar. I had no intention of ever being a teacher. In fact, I told people constantly I never was going to be. So maybe one of these days when we're back in class together, we can have that conversation. All right. So now let's go ahead and hit the last two parts. The fourth Tuesday, which talks about death, which this is the big one. We have to go ahead and get it out of the way. All right. And this is a powerful section. A couple years ago, I had kids pick one of the 14 Tuesdays to write about that really impacted them. And this was probably in the top three. So Morrie starts right off. He says, everyone knows they're going to die, but nobody believes it. And, that's a common sense statement. I mean, none of us, even in times like this, where death is constantly brought up on the news, and we're so scared that we could, catch this virus going around and it might kill us. We're constantly thinking about this. Even in a time like this, most of us see that as that doesn't touch us. That's someone else's problem. And we don't say it, but we think that way. I mean, some people say it. I've seen Looney Tunes on Facebook making comments about how this virus is a hoax and it's not real because you don't really know anyone who's got it, which is just, the bottom levels of reasoning, to be honest with you. But so that by itself isn't powerful enough. But if we keep reading, he says, and this part, again, it's not that a lot of the stuff Morrie says is earth-shattering and you've never thought about it that way. It's the way that Album and Morrie originally puts them that kind of gets you to think about it, all right? So here's the big central part of this. He says, nobody believes it. If we did, we would do things differently. And that's kind of the key. He's like, we don't believe we're going to die. If we did, we would change the things we cared about, the things we focused on. He thinks particularly, and he'll say this, I'm going to skip around a little in this chapter, but he tells Mitch later, he's like, if you really believed you were going to die, you might not be such an ambitious person. And that's kind of one of the things. Now, a couple of you, when you were writing about on your test papers for me about that essay about college pressures, a lot of you talked about being ambitious and, the stress and stuff you put yourself under because you have this whole life planned out for yourself, and that's terrific. The thing is if we knew you were only going to live to 40 years old, let's say, would all of that still be where you put your effort? And for most of you, the answer would be no. I mean, I wouldn't be about, building this high-powered career and going through all this if I was going to die at an early age. So what would you do instead? Well, I'd spend more time with the people I love and care about. I'd spend more time enjoying the things that I love. I would go travel and do some of the things I've always wanted to do. And Morrie's point, and you don't have to agree with this now, but Morrie's point is, if that's the case, then why do you wait? Because we don't know when we're going to die. So you're going to miss out on that. You may think you're going to live to be 70, and you think I'm going to retire at 50 and have 20 years to travel the world and do all this stuff, instead of thinking about, I may not make it to that. Yes, I need to plan for my future, but maybe I should mix in some of the things that I care about, because you don't want to be finding out you've got ALS and 2 years to live, and looking down the line like I've done nothing I wanted to do, and now I can't. So it's kind of an interesting way of thinking. It's a way that, obviously there's some flaws in it. You don't want to just do things that you want and not plan for your future. But then again, should 95% of your effort be put into, I'm going to, make, this grades, I'm going to get into this school, and I'm going to get into this career, and I'm going to work harder than anyone so that I can become the youngest CEO at the age of 28 or whatever. And then, what's it for when you get struck down with something like coronavirus? All right. So, he's not saying don't make plans. He's not saying don't think about your future, but he's saying think about your future as it may not be as long as you think it is, and to give yourself time to do the things you love and care about people. All right. What are you going to leave behind? Morrie has this, it's going to come up a couple times in the book, so I want to point it out, although it doesn't really it seems purposeful here. Morrie thinks about this old Buddhist saying about every morning he gets up and has this pretend bird on his shoulder and asks it, is today the day I die? Have I done all the things I need to? Am I who I want to be today? And your answers to that should dictate how you carry out your day. He's going to bring that up several times about asking, is this the day I die? Because it's definitely in the forefront for him now. Another one of the little aphorisms or quick phrases that he uses that are really powerful in this one is, he says, the truth is, Mitch, he said, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. And really, I have to say, that's a key for me in this. A long time ago, I learned that, I understand the concept of death. I haven't had a lot of it touch me in my life. I've lost my grandparents, both of them. I've lost my father, but I was never close to my father. My mother's still alive. She's doing well. I've never lost anyone super close to me. But I've come to grips with death a long time ago. I just did. A lot of people, when you look at their top 3 or 4 fears on the planet, death hits that number. It just hasn't for me. I'm not scared of it. I know it could come at any time. I've got health issues. I realize that death could happen. So I do everything I can to not let that be one of those things that, I'm going to regret my days on this earth because I just sat and worked. Now, I work really hard, but that's because I love what I do. I want to, have impact on you guys and leave that legacy behind. If all I was doing was running a business and I was selling, I don't know, groceries, I would have a much different approach to my work. Let me just tell you. So, but once you learn that, it does impact how you live, because it does take away some of the fear, and it does get you to refocus on the things that are important, which is not always the job. A lot of it is your family, and a lot of it is your friends and things like that. All right. So then he talks to Mitch about his ambition, and then there's this really, let me find it. Yeah, he's trying to explain to him the concept of, once you learn to accept death, how you look at things differently. And here's what he says. He says, he nodded toward the window with the sunshine streaming. He says, you see that? You can go out there, outside anytime. You can run up and down the block and go crazy. I can't do that. I can't go out. I can't run. I can't be out there without fear of getting sick. But you know what? I appreciate that window more than you do. And that is such a cool little, allegory there. He's like, you don't appreciate the window because you can go on the other side of the window. I can't, so that window's everything to me. And he's saying again how, dealing with the concept of death allows us to become more appreciative of the things we have and not, take them for granted, which we do. Think about all the things we take for granted daily. All right. Okay, so that gets us through this chapter. There's a few little other narrative details that I just don't feel like discussing. And again, trying to keep your videos less lengthy. Then we get to the 5th Tuesday, which is the one where they talk about family. And this is the last reading you had for the week. This section is not really as impactful to me. Now, he's talking about a great topic. Family is really important, but there's no new way of seeing things in this chapter as far as I'm concerned. He basically points out that family is important, especially when you get to this point in your life, which everyone knows that. That is not an unheard of thing. Now, we don't live like it. Some of us aren't very close with our families. Beyond my immediate family, and by my immediate family, I mean my wife and children, I'm just not super close with any of my other relatives, not even my mom. I mean, my mom was a single mom. She grew up and raised me by herself. And, we were close because we spent a lot of time together. But today, I call her, every once in a while just to check in. I rarely hear from her unless I call her first. And, we just don't have much of a relationship. So I do care about my, wife and kids a whole lot, but I mean, beyond them, there's just not a lot for me family wise. So this one that may be why I don't really connect to this the way a lot of people may. He says the fact is there's no foundation, no secure ground upon which people may stand today if it isn't the family. It's become quite clear to me as I've been sick, if you don't have the support and love and caring and concern that you get from a family, you don't have much at all. Love is so supremely important. As our great poet Auden said, love each other or perish. So Morrie's really pointing out the importance of having someone who loves you and that is looking out for you. And he says really that's the key to the family. It's not just the love part, it's that knowing there's someone there for you when you need them. All right, and that can be family immediately, blood family, that can be friends, it can be anything. All right. Um, really, this chapter seems to me to be more of a narrative element because it gives us more information about Morrie's kids and his family, and the fact that he does have this close support system. And we also get more about him characterization-wise because he says to them, "Do not stop your lives. Otherwise, this disease will have ruined 3 of us instead of 1." Just basically telling them, "Don't pity me and don't sit here and dote on me. You go on with your life. Come by and see me, but you don't have to quit your job and move in and live in live in the house and take care of me." This is in this way, even as he was dying, he showed respect for his children's worlds. Little wonder that when they sat with him, there was a waterfall of affection, lots of kisses and jokes, and crouching by the side of the bed and holding hands. One of the really tender things in this book is to see Morrie's interaction with his family because they do love him. You can tell. And it's neat to see that because so many of us lack that in our lives. So, another one of the moments that can be kind of a tearjerker here, he says near the tail end of this, he says, "Mitch, I would not have missed this experience for anything." He's talking about having a family and having kids. He says, "Even though," and then the dot, 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 which, when you're writing like this, just means he's trailing off. It says he swallowed and put the picture in his lap. "Even though there's a painful price to pay," he said, "because you'll be leaving them, because I'll be leaving them soon." So he's sitting there realizing that he wouldn't change this for anything, even though he is going through immense amounts of pain thinking about leaving his family right now. I had to have a talk with Maddox recently when we lost a pet. That's one of the tragedies of having a pet. You can love them for 15, 16 years, and then one day this is coming. So you have to be prepared for it and weigh the sadness for the years and years of happiness. And Morrie's kind of doing that now, but not with a pet. He's doing it with his relationship with his family. And then what this chapter is really here for is to set up Mitch's association with his family, and that's kind of key. Because he asks him about his family, and we don't get much detail, but we get the detail about one person that we need, which is going to be a payoff in the end, and that is his brother. Mitch's brother suffers from cancer. In fact, if we think back earlier in the book, and good writers do this, they'll put a detail here and then they'll bring it back later. When we talk about transitioning, a lot of you lack good transitioning. This is how you do it. You have a detail here and then you bring it back later, which kind of makes readers think back and their brain connects back to that other point, and then everything in between also kind of is re-solidified. So we remember earlier Mitch had mentioned an uncle who had stomach cancer and died a very painful death. Well, he in his head had just been convinced that, he was going to be the one who got it next. That's why he worked so hard, was because, he wanted to make sure that he didn't have to rely on someone else. He wanted to have all this money and all this prestige. So if he died, that's what he had. But the sad thing is he's not the one who catches it. His younger brother does. And he was right. Genetically, one of them did get it, but it's his younger brother. And his brother has a weird way of handling it. He's gone overseas to these other places because the U.S. medical system, there's a lot of red tape with dealing with experimental treatments and things like that. So he moves to Europe. And he's kind of cut contact with his family. A lot of it may just be because he doesn't want to burden them with his illness, and he doesn't want to, he wants them to go on with their lives just like Morrie did with his family. There's also this tension that they're not as close as Morrie and his family are. And so he just this is his burden, and he's decided to go off and take care of it. So Mitch and his brother have a very strained relationship. I mean, like, he calls his brother, and his brother won't return his calls. And Morrie wanted to get to that. And this is one of the amazing things about this man. That's why there's just not that many of them on this planet. He realizes that this is the area Mitch hurts. This is what good teachers, it's what good counselors can do. They can pick up on your one area where they know you really hurt. And they may not directly come out and say, hey, you need to do this. They can work you to that point and to where you're thinking about it and there's a way to solve it without directly saying anything. And Morrie's kind of brought up this family thing because he wants Mitch to reconcile with his brother. He wants him to think about it, and he doesn't directly say, "Hey, you need to do this," but he definitely wants him to think about it in the context of, "Hey, look at my situation. If you were in this situation, what would your life look like?" All right, and so that kind of ends out this section. We end here. We'll pick up next week where we, get to, we're a little less than halfway through the Tuesday sections. We're over halfway through the book, and next week we're going to finish it. All right. So, kind of your thought for today really deals more around the concept of death. And I know this is a morbid thought, and don't dwell on this, okay? Don't make yourself sick. But I want you to think about, if you knew you had until let's say 40, the age of 40 to live, what things would you focus on? What would be the most important to you? And how can we make that part of our daily lives now? Okay, let's hope you all live to be 100, but it's not going to hurt you to think about it in the context of I would spend more time, I would invest more in my relationships with my family and friends. Okay, well, let's do that. Let's do that. Having 100 in every class is a great thing. But if you make a 95 in one, and an hour you spent studying, you could spend helping your mom with the dishes or something, and you could spend time talking to her about your day. That's a worthy sacrifice. Okay, I mean, I want you all to make high grades in my classes, but I would much rather you have a good relationship with your parents and then you make a B in my class than I would you make an A because you spend hours and hours and hours studying and you do nothing but that. Okay, you need to balance things in your life. Okay. Now, don't try to use that as an excuse. Well, I'm just going to make D's in class, and that way I can spend more time with my family. The problem is a lot of you that think that way aren't using that time to spend it with your family. You're spending it with your cell phone. You're spending it with Netflix. You're spending it with, hanging out with your friends. And by hanging out with your friends, I don't mean doing positive things with your friends. So, I mean, let's look at investing in positive things in our relationships in these next few weeks, especially over this weekend. As we go through Easter. Don't turn Easter into this holiday where you just get to eat a little bit and the Easter Bunny brings you some little cute toy. Let's make it more than that. All right, let's be bigger. And yes, I realize you're older and that's not a thing, but let's make this a time about family. All right. So have a great Easter. Enjoy your time, and next week we'll knock out the rest of this book and we'll cry a little together because it's definitely going to build to that. All right. Okay, stay safe and sane. I love you guys.